Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time of day, wherever it is you're watching this broadcast today. Welcome. My name is Mark Huron. We're here with the Spirit Plant Medicine World Conscious Living Network here in Vancouver, and anybody who might be watching out there on the World Wide Web. We are here today with my good friend and Spirit Plant Medicine Conference co-producer and host and MC, Stephen Gray. Welcome, Stephen. And today we have the pleasure and honor of speaking with Dennis Mckenna. Dennis is going to be another one of our speakers at the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference coming up on November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And he's actually going to be giving the closing address for that conference. And just before we got on here, we started having some interesting conversations about the future of psychedelics, the now of psychedelics, even the past of psychedelics. So we're going to carry on this conversation. We thought it was a great time to get started. So welcome, Dennis, to our program again. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to come on. Good to see you again in this space.
Yes, it's a blessing to be able to share your work and the work of others to, have some opportunities for healing in a different way using plant medicines and psychedelics. So you're certainly been a pioneer and in this field for a long time. And maybe you can give our viewers, for those people who don't know you, maybe a little bit of your history, your story of how you got into this field. And we can start naturally going on from there, because I know Stephen and I will have a lot of questions.
All right. Well, most people know that I'm Terrence McKenna's younger brother, so that's one stake I can put in the ground, and I'm kind of carrying on the quest that we pioneered. And then I'm also a scientist. I sometimes call myself an ethnopharmacologist, and I think I can probably legitimately claim that. And of course, I did my work that got me that status at the University of British Columbia under Dr. Neil Towers. So I'm an old guy. I'm an elder. When people start saying you're a legend, you're an elder, I suppose I can claim all that. But then the next phrase is like, you're on your way out. Well, I'm not on my way out yet. I'm very much here, and I don't want people to say, Dennis McKenna, wonder whatever happened to him. I mean, I'm here, and I'm here to stir up controversy, not for controversy for its own sake. I guess more accurately, I'm here to stimulate reflection and thoughtful discussion about all of these topics, and we're living in a different world. I mean, it's just amazing how over the last 5 years and really accelerated in the last 2 years, how quickly all this is changing. The regulatory landscape, the wider public acceptance of psychedelics, and then, of course, the coming together of the corporate and investment sectors with the therapeutic sectors. Everyone is trying to scramble for position and figure out how they fit in. And depending on their approach, it's like, how do we create a synergistic kind of co-evolutionary acceptance and integration of psychedelics into our society, because here they are, and they're not going away. So that's a concern. And then there is also concern that are naturally raised by this, that these medicines, which have long existed kind of on the margins, they've been, the indigenous people have been the stewards of this knowledge. In the Western world, the medicines have been vilified, condemned, prohibited for a long time, and suddenly we're pivoting back the other direction, where people are saying, well, not only should not be prohibited, but they may be the next best hope for at least the revolution of the mental health care system toward a more effective paradigm. And it goes beyond that. And one of the points I've been making in my talks many corporate entities are now focused on how do we turn this, how do we monetize this, and how do we do that in a way that is both an effective business approach, but also acknowledges and tries to honor the many ethical issues that this raises. There has never been a medicine brought into biomedical practice that's like psychedelics. I mean, you can develop a new cancer drug or a new heart drug or different types of drugs, but none of those are really connected to the cultural, historical, and I dare say coevolutionary context that psychedelics are. And so how we approach these medicines as a society, raises huge issues, huge political and ethical issues.
Yeah. So let's get into that more. But maybe I could ask you this question: if you were the benevolent dictator of the world and your magical powers could press a button and unfold the next 10 to 20 years as a done deal, what do you think would be the best way forward for the development of this recognition and ingress into the culture with these medicines? Because obviously there are concerns. You have them, we have them, about who's going to control it, what happens within the the ceremonial therapeutic world, the monetization issues, all that stuff. What do you think needs to happen, Dennis?
Wow, that's a tall order for you to ask me that, because it implies that I have all the answers, and I certainly don't. I am witnessing this and participating in it along with everybody else, and a lot of people are scratching their heads, wondering how is this going to turn out? And there are so many undesirable ways that it could turn out. So I think we have to be very careful. I think 2 or 3 or more than that, but a few considerations kind of bubble to the top in my list of concerns, I guess you could say. One is that I hope the biomedicalization or the transformation of psychedelics into pharmaceuticals that are sold, that are used only in clinical studies and so on. I hope that people don't mistake that for ownership of psychedelics. I mean, and I think we have to be careful about who owns these medicines and who owns the wisdom and the knowledge that go with it. And the obvious answer is that Indigenous people have been the stewards of this knowledge and the plants themselves, the fungi, the genetic resources for thousands of years. And we have to acknowledge that, and we have to support it. We have to encourage it. One thing I think we have to do is, I would be happy if one were able to go to a clinic and receive pharmaceutical quality psilocybin in a supportive therapeutic session. And, this is something that my colleagues and I at the Hefter Institute and other organizations like MAPS have long hoped for. But what are the unintended consequences of that? So, for example, once clinical psilocybin becomes available, and psilocybin, there are others under development, but psilocybin and MDMA seem to be the two that are out front. Once that becomes available, what is the impact, first of all, going to be on the regulatory environment? Is it going to be a situation where if you're wealthy and privileged, you can go to a clinic and have psilocybin if you can pay for it? It's unlikely insurance is going to pay for it. So what about the rest of us, who really neither want nor need that type of therapy, but we would like to have access to our traditional plant medicines, and our preference, at least many people's preference, including my own, is to be able to use the natural product in a well-controlled, thought-out setting, whether that's a traditional one or not, doesn't really matter as long as it's well structured. I would not want to see a situation arise where a person could go to a psilocybin clinic and get that therapy. But if I choose to go into the mountains and find mushrooms and consume them, then I'm committing a federal felony. This is not right.
So what do you think? What do you think the realistic possibilities are for allowing that to happen? As we go forward. I mean, is it just should the state just stay out of it, period, and allow this sort of gray area to continue, or do you see any way that there can be a happy medium in there somewhere where there's some kind of oversight, or what do you think?
I think there should be some oversight, but I think it should be minimal. I think that the state should really not be so active in this. I think that what is necessary is education. And as we've always said and advocated, the main thing is education. We have to make the information available so that people can use these substances in a way that's beneficial, minimizes any harm that might result, maximizes any benefit. Those can be of stated objectives, but then if you get down into the details of what that's going to look like, I think it's a mistake for the state to get involved in that. They should encourage access to the medicines, natural psychedelics, and thoughtful, safe, beneficial uses of them should be encouraged. And beyond that, the state should not regulate these medicines other than from a standpoint of quality and safety. Quality control, safety of the compositions and all that. The kind of regulatory standards that you might apply to any natural medicine. I mean, the herbal products industry has already invented this paradigm, and that's basically how herbal medicines are marketed. They're available, and the attention is paid to quality control, and then and that's fine. If you want a quality medicine, or if you choose to grow them or prepare them on your own, that should not be discouraged. What should be encouraged is providing the information so that they can do that in a way to that results in great medicines that are also safe and effective.
So you see that. Go ahead, Mark.
If I may, Steve, for a sec. One thing I want to thank you, Dennis, is talking about the educational component and to provide, the right information and the right education of people. And, that's one thing that we take pride in regards to the conference, is to provide that education so that people can make an educated decision based on what they want to do moving forward. It puts them in contact with people where they can actually have conversations with, creates community. And, so I totally agree and support what you're saying there in terms of the education. Now, the one question that I did have for you, it kind of backs up a little bit, where you're talking about the pharmaceutical grade of the medicine versus a natural grade. So if you're to take a mushroom, let's say, what would they do to it, pharmaceutically to make it better than just eating it naturally?
Well, it's not necessarily that it's better. It's just different. Pharmaceutical grade psilocybin is pure psilocybin. Probably not natural, probably a synthetic compound, because we know how to synthesize psilocybin, made under what they call CGMP standards. That's GMP is good manufacturing standards. So it's a protocol that you have to apply to production of any pharmaceutical. And even the herbal products industry, at least in the States, which is the regulatory framework I know better, I'm pretty familiar with natural health products. Is the category in Canada, and it's very similar. And they like to impose certain standards about quality, and I am totally in favor of that. If you're going to sell it commercially, whether it's a natural extract, it should be standardized so you know what you're getting. It should be examined for microbial contamination and other possible adulterants. That, this is a pretty common sense, ordinary kind of standards, for a natural medicine. And even that shouldn't apply. So that's one category. If people want to purchase natural medicine, they should be able to do that. They should be assured that it's good quality. If they go into a psilocybin dispensary, it exists now only in the imagination. If they go to one of these dispensaries, they should leave not only with the medicine, but like with any product, they should leave with the equivalent of a package insert, a long description of what it is, how to take it, how not to take it, how not to mix it. So that's the educational part. If, on the other hand, you exist entirely outside of, any type of commercial or business framework, in other words, if you're a person who does not want to purchase your medicines, like many people don't wish to purchase cannabis, they want to grow it themselves, that should totally be encouraged. And the level of regulation that would apply to that should be almost none. Because what you're doing, other than, again, the education, the information should be available. But this is to choose to grow a plant, cultivate it, and prepare a medicine from it is what you're doing is you're engaging in symbiosis. And symbiosis is a word I like to use a lot. And symbiosis, as you know, is a close relationship between two different species. And it's often, not always, but often it's mutually beneficial. And that's the kind of symbiosis we're interested in. If you choose to grow mushrooms, for example, and consume them and share them with your friends or whatever, that's a kind of symbiosis. You've formed a relationship with this intelligent being, with this intelligent species. And lately, as Stephen knows, as you both know from the Cannabis 101 seminar that we did earlier in the summer, I've become somebody who's basically asserting that symbiosis is a human right. And it's
Beautiful.
more than a human right, because there are non-human partners involved in this. Symbiosis is a basic right of living things.
Wonderful.
And no government should interfere with this.
So I was just going to say, it sounds like basically you would like to see a situation very similar to the way things are happening now with some of these medicines, which is it's a sort of a caveat emptor situation. It's commonly held, for example, that a lot of us feel that if you're going to go and do ayahuasca with some ceremony leader, you really need to take the time to find out who is this person, get a personal recommendation from somebody you trust. So basically, in this world, you're, I think, what you'd call a libertarian, like they keep the state out of the ceremony rooms of the nation.
And just as a side note, I wanted to let our viewers know what caveat emptor means: buyer beware.
Right, buyer beware.
Just in case, sometimes Stephen used these big Latin words I don't even know the meaning to, but I know that one.
I think on a couple of levels, I think I am not libertarian in the sense that I think the government should just be totally hands off. I think if you're going to enter a sphere of commerce where you're producing natural medicines that you intend to sell, then you're a business and you're going to have to meet some standards. If you're just a guy who has a garden and you want to make extracts in your kitchen and you're not selling them, you should be left alone. You know, I mean, you shouldn't be coerced into anything. You should be encouraged to know what you're doing. You know, I mean, because there are issues of toxicity and so on, but it shouldn't be a top-down state-imposed thing. It should be more like a gentle, you know, here's a website with some information about how to prepare your medicines safely and effectively. And you know, if you want to produce great psychedelics from natural sources, it behooves you to look at this information. Not going to force people, but it's for their own good, you know, for their own safety and actually for their own, you know, enjoyment of these things. So I think that's important. But in the business sector, there has to be a certain degree of regulation, whether the medicines are natural or clinical. And the clinical preparations, we don't really have a choice because those things, you know, will not be allowed unless certain standards are met for manufacture, and hopefully there's, you know, support for their use from good, well-designed scientific studies and that sort of thing. And that's what's already happening, you know. And it's interesting what you said, Stephen. It's like all of this is just common sense. And in a way, we're at a juncture where we're saying, well, everything's going to change, right? Now that the tone of the conversation has changed, all these companies are getting into it, these clinical trials are going forward, you know, everything's going to change. But the reality is not much is going to change because, in fact, these medicines have always been used this way. You know, it's the clinic, it's the incorporation into biomedicine. That is truly new. But I think something people are also overlooking here, it's going to be probably at least 5 years before you can go to a clinic and get pharmaceutical psilocybin and have a session with therapists looking after you. I mean, it may be a faster track than that with certain things.
No,
it's going to take a while. I mean, there are things like ketamine that you can use that way now because it's a already approved drug. And a couple of these things are being fast-tracked. MDMA for trauma, psilocybin for depression, they're being fast-tracked. But most people, for the foreseeable future, if they want to get into psychedelics, they'll have to turn to nature. They will be using natural psychedelics because the others are not available, you know, or not legally available. I suppose you can find the pure psilocybin in the underground, but you know, it's kind of like with MDMA. You can find MDMA in pill form. The question is, how do you know it's MDMA? You know, and that's one of the beauties of natural medicine is at least you know what it is usually, especially if it's something recognizable like dried mushrooms. I mean, there's not much question what it is you're getting. You know,
indeed, yeah.
So we're in a time of flux, and in a lot of ways, I think it's going to continue the way it is, but maybe it's going to happen with more clarity, a better understanding of what's really going on.
Yeah, you know? I think one thing that it's already happening, and I think this is a really good direction. There are places like CIIS and other people that are doing this even more on the down low, that are training people to be therapists and ceremony leaders. And, you know, this is all within the so-called unlicensed, you know, realm, as it were. But, you know, I could see, you know, over time, as more and more people get interested in, you know, taking psilocybin as a particular example, for example, you know, this probably happens in a lot of fields where, you know, somebody's got a certification from a certain well-recognized and honored, you know, institution or organization. I go, oh, this guy's got a certificate from, you know, CIIS or whatever. No, he's gone through, paid his dues, done the apprenticeship and all that kind of thing. And I'd like to see a lot more of that. Yeah,
I would too. And yet, what I don't want to see is the abandoning or abjuration of more traditional forms of more traditional what's the word, instantiations of the setting. You know, I mean, the clinical paradigm is in part it's very restrained because of the nature of the clinical studies, the constraints that these clinical studies, which are all experimental, right? So in experimental FDA-approved clinical studies, there's only so much you can get away with, right, in terms of how you structure the setting. So it comes down to, you know, people come to a clinic, which looks like a nice room, and, you know, you put on eye shades and you listen to classical music, and that's the structure of the setting. And I don't have a problem with that, but you could do so much more, you know, if you could integrate other practices, more traditional practices. So, Mark, you asked me a while back, what do I see as the future? What I would like to see are centers where you could go and have these experiences in a more traditional setting. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to buy into a particular indigenous worldview or, you know, but you can borrow from those, learn from those. We have to create our own shamanism and our own mental health practices for using these things therapeutically. I kind of think this is going to revolutionize psychiatry in the sense that it can bring psychiatry and mental health care together with shamanism, which is a kind of folk psychiatry, I suppose you could call it, and create something that is greater than either one of these things, that you have all the best of traditional practices, ceremony, the creative use of sound, creative use of dance and movement, colors, you name it, integrate all of that with the best of clinical care, you know, where you have white-coated psychiatrists, if that reassures you, or you have mental health professionals and you have a very supportive environment that does include the you know, the medical approach as well as the ceremonial approach. They are not they are compatible. They're not incompatible. But I think the community, the medical community, and what you might call the I don't know what, maybe the shamanic community, need to be talking to each other and creating these paradigms that are more than either one alone, and are basically, so sociologically, what does that mean? It means that you might be able to, you know, you've got a long weekend, what are you going to do? Well, maybe you go camping in the mountains, or maybe you go to one of these therapeutic centers, you know, and they don't look like clinics, they look like spas. You know, and you can go, you can bring the whole family. You can, you know, take a medicine under good conditions, do a little yoga, get some massage, you know, make it a more holistic thing. And I honestly think, and I would like to see these centers become, you know, common enough that almost every community has one, or two, or three, or however many it takes. I mean, many communities already do. The difference is they're underground. You know, they're prohibited, so everybody's doing this on the QT. Why not bring it out? Why not bring it out into public and say, we have a spa, and you can come here for yoga, you can counseling on diet, nutrition, you know, interesting seminars, and yeah, you can take medicine.
Dennis, this is a brilliant vision. Wonderful, really. Are you going to talk about that a little bit when you speak at the conference?
Well, yeah.
I think that'd be a great way to send people out the door.
I don't take credit for this. I mean, it just seems to me it's very obvious. This is the way. This is the way to do it. You know, this is a way to integrate these ancient medicines, which have always been on the margins of what we call global culture. Well, now, you know, for whatever reason, they have invaded global culture. They're here to stay. You know, what you see with cannabis and ayahuasca and psilocybin, as I often say, I just work for the plants. And I think, I'm a believer in plant intelligence. And I don't want to sound too woo-woo here, but you got to wonder how much do the plants have to do with what's happening? You know, you've got these plants that were always sort of content to live in their natural environment and in whatever indigenous context they had. All of a sudden, they've exploded onto the global stage. Is that our doing, or is that the plants doing? You know,
it's got to be, yeah. It's got to be the plants. Have you seen these studies, like where they plant a number of a certain species of a plant, you know, in close proximity, and then they experiment with different other species near them or more of the same, and they behave completely differently when it's more of their own clan, as it were. You know, their root systems develop differently, but when there's another species there, they go, oh, better get active here, and they kick up the jams and send the roots out farther and faster and all this stuff. And obviously, it seems obvious to me that there's an immense amount of intelligence and sort of strategy for keeping the species going on.
Right,
Yeah,
right, exactly. And these natural psychedelics like ayahuasca and psilocybin I sometimes say they are ambassadors from Gaia. You know, and Gaia is, a kind of a buzzword for the community of intelligent species in the biosphere. And many more than just us. We are arrogant about our intelligence. Plants are intelligent too. Many organisms have a form of intelligence that may not involve big brains or may not involve brains at all. We haven't been able to find a brain in the way we would think of it, but what we do find is neural networks and highly organized networks of organization, and like the work that Suzanne Simard has done at UBC with old growth forests. And Paul Stamets also speaks of this very eloquently. The networks of mycelium in the forest that are anastomosing, that are in symbiosis essentially with the roots of trees, have created a forest internet. And you don't see it. It's all underground. But it works essentially like a nervous system in the sense that it is sensitive to stimuli from the environment, and it is very efficient at maintaining equilibrium and stability within these vast ecosystems. Of course, the problem that we're facing is that we, the big brain stupid monkeys, are putting so much pressure on these global systems that the plants almost have to come forward, and because they're sending a message from Gaia, and the message is wake up, stop doing what you're doing because you're wrecking this place. And every year we see the effects, and we see the denial of this. Right now, it's pretty hard to deny climate change and all the effects that's happening. I think you have to be willfully ignorant to claim that climate change is not real. It is definitely real, and its effects are accelerating. So the plants are trying to bring that wisdom to us, and it's interesting how many people, their main take-home lesson from their psychedelic experiences, especially if they do it in nature, is a re-understanding, a reframing of their relationship with nature, and a realization that nature is not something that we own. It's not something that we control. We should be doing none of that, and in fact, it's impossible for us to own those things. But that's the model we've been following ever since Judeo-Christianity sent the message that nature is not of value, which I think is a dangerous and very toxic message. and like, because then you remove the incentive to respect nature, to honor it, and to acknowledge that we're part of it. We're not the rulers of it by any means. It is not a thing that can be dominated. But we've had this mindset for so many centuries that it's just something that we should extract things out of and not give very much back. So those attitudes are changing, and I think that psychedelics are being a catalyst for that global consciousness change.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I might take a moment to plug my new academy, the McKenna Academy of Natural Philosophy. Which is a nonprofit I've created. People can look at the website, and in a couple of weeks there will actually be a lot more on the website. But
I think I have your websites here. I'm gonna share.
There isn't much up there right now.
I've got your ESPD 51.
Excuse me?
Your ESPD50.com.
No, that's from a conference that I did a couple of years ago. That was so last year, Mark. I mean, it's still happening. No, this is www.McKenna.academy.
Okay.
And all we have up there is a splash page. But we are organized. We have been organizing retreats under that umbrella. We have a very interesting retreat coming up in November, which will be one of the ways I position the academy as a 21st century mystery school. So it's a mystery school in the spirit of Eleusis, which was the psychedelic mystery school, the last of the whole of a bunch of them historically, but Eleusis was one of the oldest, and survived until the Goths sacked and burned the temple of Eleusis in 396 AD, I think. We're trying to recreate a psychedelic university, in a sense. That's what the idea of the academy are, where perhaps not all the faculty members are human. And,
yeah, indeed. So does this the academy, will there be a wing or an element of it that leads or bleeds into this vision, this really brilliant vision that you shared a little while ago in our conversation about these places where you can go and have all these experiences and all that? Is that going to be part of that vision?
No, yeah. It will be exactly that,
wonderful.
Except that it will probably be located in South America, and there are reasons for that, because South America is kind of, the Andes and the Amazon are the heart of these sacred medicine traditions. So in South America, we could, yes, I want to create an institution. Right now, we don't have a physical place for it. We stage events at different places in the Sacred Valley, mostly. Eventually, we hope to have a physical location, but it doesn't really matter because we can do these programs anywhere, including even in Canada eventually. And this idea could be replicated in many different parts of the world, and once we get like the central headquarters, if you will, or the first one up and running, we'll be able to use that as a test case. We'll be able to work out the bugs and refine the programs and figure out what really works. So in some ways, it's an experiment. But we're going about it in the spirit of symbiosis. We, and the tagline for the McKenna Academy, its physical location, is that it's a catalytic nexus for the transformation of global consciousness.
Wow, brilliant. Yeah.
And it is a place where people can come and get their heads fixed and have these experiences that will help them return to this perspective on nature. And we also hope to attract people who are thought leaders, who are in a position to actually influence others, whether they're of a high position in business or government or academics or philosophies or whatever, but bring the most brilliant minds we can persuade to come down there, is one way to put it, and let people get together and share these experiences where the medicine is kind of the lubricant that is making this social dynamic happen, and that's my hope for the Academy. And
that's brilliant. Yeah. And that also, I just love this whole vision that you're sharing with us, Dennis. I think it's really important. And when this idea of bringing in the thought leaders, this is what Aldous Huxley and some of his people wanted to do with the psychedelics back in the 50s, right? Was have a trickle down sort of a thing where the thought leaders came in first, were influenced by it, and then started to influence the larger public. But now you're including that, but you've got a much broader vision than that too, because it's not exclusively that, right? It's not exclusively going for those people. Yeah.
No, not at all. I mean, we want to get those people, but we want anyone who can contribute to energy and ideas and talent. And of course, being a nonprofit, we're also happy to accept financial support as well. And we hope to get charitable status. We're applying right now for charitable status for the Academy, so that people who have those kind of resources, financial resources, can help create the Academy and feel good about where their money is going. We're all committed to transparency and collaboration. It's all about symbiosis. So we're inclusive in those ways, and we understand that sometimes these events are very expensive. We're trying to find mechanisms where those who are able to pay and for whom that's not a strain can pay a little more, so that we can offer subsidies, scholarships, even fellowships to people who have a lot to offer, but maybe money is not one of the things they really have, but they can bring a lot of other benefits to these kinds of events. So
that's really important too, and especially for younger people.
Especially for younger people.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's just feels really passionate about how we've got to create financial breaks or incentives for people that are in their late teens and early 20s who haven't amassed much money, because they're the ones that are going to be, taking over as time goes by, right?
Right. Yeah. And eventually those people will have money. But right now, they're appreciative, and we're just starting out as an organization. But we're doing our best to try to express this philosophy. For example, the retreats that I'm organizing with a group of wonderful colleagues. I don't want to give the impression that it's just me, because it's not. There are some wonderful people collaborating on this. I would include you and you two as well, because we work with organizations like this to get the word out. Nobody will come to our events if they don't know about them. So what you're doing is also very important, to just make the world aware of it. But it's a very collaborative thing. And we invite people to get on board and bring what they can to it. And that may be knowledge, that may be finances, that may be skills, and we don't want it to be exclusively about psychedelics. We want it to be. We want to have, for example, if we have a center in the Sacred Valley, we want to work closely with Indigenous people on permaculture projects and other types of food and nutritional related projects, and environmental restoration. I mean, the whole spectrum. And I thank you, Steve, for saying it's a brilliant idea, and it is. But I can't really take credit for it, because it just seems so damn obvious to me. It's not like it took a genius to think this up. It's just obvious.
Well, you've got the talent for articulating it.
I'm good at articulating it, maybe.
Well, we're not trying to build up your ego, Dennis, but the fact is you're in this particularly excellent position to share this information, and you've got the particular kinds of mental capabilities to do that in an eloquent manner. So it's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, I'll accept that, but it is a collaborative result.
Indeed.
It reflects the effort and brilliance of many people, and it's growing. That's
So I've got a couple of questions for you here that kind of tie into what you've been talking about, because I love what you're doing as well. And when we talk about education being, on the front burner of, learning about these medicines. And we had a great conversation with Rachel Carvel yesterday about permaculture and the farming and the things of that nature when it comes down to taking care of the medicines. And she was sharing some of the things there. My question comes up about, people start learning more, they start participating more, they start working with the medicines more. We get these influencers in there to influence more people to do more work. What do you see? Because there's already issues with sustainability of these medicines. What do you see being the future of that as more and more people start looking at these medicines for healing, and say the masses start going towards it? What do you see happening with sustainability in that regard?
Well, I think these are one of the challenges that we're facing, is how do we maintain the sustainable supplies? But in a sense, you do that by anticipating what the future needs are going to be and planning for it. I mean, in a sense, market forces will ensure that. People don't worry too much. Maybe they should be worried, but they're not worried too much, say, about the sustainability of chocolate or of coffee or things like that. These are commodities, and sometimes there are pressures on the global supply, but basically there's a demand for these products. And so there are people that are going to respond to that demand. I think much the same is true of psychedelics. There have been some interesting surveys in South America about the sustainability of ayahuasca and the sources of ayahuasca. And in fact, our friend Chris Killam, the medicine hunter, has talked about this last year, and I believe he'll be back this year. Is that correct? Yeah. So he's published a couple of interesting articles in Herbalgram. He's been down there kind of surveying the sustainability question. And, there isn't that much pressure on the supply, especially there are like 200 retreats that are in and around Iquitos.
Wow.
Now, that's a lot. That's probably too many. But the ones that are doing a responsible job are growing their own. They're not getting it out of the forest. They have cultivation projects underway. Another example here are the Brazilian churches. The one that I'm personally familiar with is the UDV, and they have like about 20,000 members in Brazil, and various small temples scattered around the country. And many of these people, they have to produce enough ayahuasca to serve 20,000 people every 2 weeks. On average, that's what they do. Well, they don't have a central production facility, as far as I know. Every temple has a garden and has some hectares of land where they're growing their local supplies. It's working. They have a sustainable supply, and they have control over the quality also of their medicine from the soil to the cup, you might say.
Yeah, beautiful. Doesn't it take a long time for the vine itself to mature to the point when it can be harvested?
No, not really.
No?
It takes a while. The more rate limiting factor here is the chacruna, which is the admixture plant. That's a shrub, and it takes a few years to get mature enough that you can harvest the leaves. The vine actually proliferates quite rapidly.
Oh, I didn't know that.
In the right ecosystems, in fact, in Hawaii, which is a good example, because Hawaii is probably the other big epicenter of ayahuasca production in the world now, because ayahuasca and chacruna were exported to Hawaii years ago. In fact, I know because I did it. I don't know if I don't know if I'm the first one, but I was one of the first ones. Botanical Dimensions, the nonprofit that my brother and his wife Kat started, were it was established as the idea was to be an ethnobotanical garden, but the main crop was ayahuasca, and from that epicenter on the Big Island, it spread throughout Hawaii, and there's no shortage of ayahuasca in Hawaii, I can assure you.
That's amazing,
and now the UDV, which has a permission from the DEA to import ayahuasca or use ayahuasca ceremonially as a sacrament under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. In other words, a Supreme Court acknowledgement that this is a religious practice. They had been importing their ayahuasca from Brazil, but that is difficult to do. So they've actually started a plantation, and they're growing most of their ayahuasca on Maui now. And it's all legal and transparent and above board. The DEA keeps in touch with them and monitors their production and all that. So they're happy. And the people that are part of the UDV are happy. So partly this is where market forces come in. If there's a demand, then sustainable ways will have to be, will have to be found to produce it. And some of these things are difficult to grow, or you can't really do them sustainably. And so at that point, you come to a point of, well, maybe we don't want to promote this, or maybe we don't want to, put too much pressure on this. But ayahuasca mushrooms are perfectly able to be cultivated at pretty much any scale.
Oh, yeah.
They're pretty easy.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Dennis. Mark, I was just wondering, I noticed there have been a bunch of questions come in. Do you want to point any of those, Dennis?
Well, I did have one question. I'm glad you're able to see them there. I don't know what you see on your studio, and I was going to ask this one question because I think it's a fair question. One of our Facebook viewers, he says he has witnessed radical social justice identity politics riddled the psychedelic community. This impacts individuals who with session when getting involved in conferences, groups, and educational institutions. So he says, Dennis, will your academy be entrenched in radical social justice / identity politics?
I don't think so.
I only asked this particular question because I know that it comes up with a lot of people. I've read comments about our conference and some of the things that people have got hundreds of comments in there, and there's some people who are saying some not very nice things about what we're doing, and then there's people who love what we're doing. So I think it's a fair question.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I think one thing, you can't please everybody. Right, and you do have to take a position. And what kind of criticisms are you getting about what you're doing?
Well, people are talking about, the indigenous, the exposure, just they think that we're exploiting, we're charging too much money, and I happen to think our prices have been quite low right from the beginning. So considering what I've seen for other conferences where people are charging, multiple hundreds of dollars more than what we're charging. And, so it's, and I agree with what you're saying. You can't please all the people all the time. And it's just interesting to see how people take such a firm stand in their belief system. And I generally don't get involved when it comes down to politics and things of that nature because I want to allow people to have their own opinions, and then I let the group kind of hash it out. And it gets pretty interesting because it gets heated where people are, they take such a stand for the indigenous people and the medicine, almost, to an evangelical point,
Right.
And I don't think I think it's always a one-sided conversation when people get that critical. especially if they haven't been to our conference. They don't know what we do. They don't know how we approach it. And the feedback that we get from some of the leaders around the world who have attended.
Or even if they do have been to the conference, people have oftentimes, with respect, some fairly fixed, ideas where they're filtering what's coming in through their belief system, right? And and I'm with Dennis on this one. Again, with respect to everyone, they have the right to their own opinions, of course, but it's what we know we're trying to do, and we're not trying to foist any particular ideology or dogma on anybody, and we're not disrespectful to anybody or any group or any nation or community or anything like that. We're coming from a vision which includes the heart, quite honestly, for helping humanity wake up, because we do know enough about what's going on that we know that there needs to be a radical consciousness transformation on this planet. And it's coming from there. It's coming from I'll just say really briefly, the Native American Church roadman who ran a lot of the Native American Church peyote ceremonies I used to go to, he once said, relatives, stay behind the medicine, which is a metaphor if people don't necessarily always get that when I put it like that. But the metaphor is, don't get out front of it with your ego, right? Stay in behind what you might call the Tao, right? The watercourse way, the natural flow of things, or what Stephen Herod Buhner called the golden thread, right? And so if you have some clarity about that, some humility about that, then you can't accommodate, or you can't get too sweaty about different people's opinions about what you're doing that way.
Right.
Yeah.
What I might say, more or less the same thing, is don't forget to listen to the medicine. I think that the medicine is they're tools for helping us clarify our thinking. And that's the thing. The McKenna Academy, we have no doctrines, we have no dogmas, other than that we're in favor of clear thinking.
and
feeling. But in some ways, we want it to be a place where people can come and learn to think, because we are so subjective to dogma and ideologies, and this person has that answer, and this other religion has that answer, and everybody's talking, but nobody's talking to each other. We're talking past each other. We want the Academy to be a place where all good ideas can be brought to the table and discussed, dissected respectfully, not condemned necessarily, even if we don't agree with them, but that's the idea of an academy. This is the Socratic notion, that it's a place where ideas are brought up, and no belief system is required. No, you don't have to join a cult. It's the anti-cult.
That's right. And then
in a sense.
Yeah. And then you take those opinions or whatever they are, and you put them into the fire of the litmus test of the medicines, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And let people evaluate for themselves, the value of these things. And it won't work for everybody. I mean, some people are quite set in what they know, or what they think they know. And I think what psychedelics are useful, they challenge that. As I think I've told you before on this show, one of the main lessons I get from psychedelics, from ayahuasca, which is kind of my main plant teacher, is a reminder of the limitations of knowledge. Sometimes it's a gentle reminder. It says, just remember how little you know. There's no place for arrogance or ego in this. Other times it's not so gentle. Sometimes it's you don't know shit, and never forget it. And that's useful too.
Absolutely, yeah. Plato's been telling us that for 2,000 years. The only thing I know is I don't know anything, right? Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that nobody has all the answers, and you learn more when you're asking questions and learning from each other, and sort of in that spirit of openness. You're not going to learn anything useful if all your filters are shut down,
That's right.
and that's the problem that religion has.
Absolutely.
They expect you to accept a set of dogma and doctrines on faith. I personally have little use for faith.
The crucible experience.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to have faith to use psychedelics. In fact, faith is an impediment. What you need is courage. And that's a different thing.
Yeah, no
the
kidding.
openness to approach the medicine with an attitude that, well, teach me what I need to know,
Beautiful.
or help me understand what I need to know. And whether, and you have to understand, I mean, this is, there is a tendency to project much of this onto the medicines. I'm guilty of it myself, just because in the way of talking about it, you tend to say, well, the medicine has a wisdom, the medicine is a teacher, and so on. And I think to a certain extent that's true. But what these medicines really do is facilitate what you might call our self-discovery of the sage that is within.
Beautiful.
In a certain way. Our own native wisdom. It's not that the medicines teach you those things. It's the medicines help you see those things.
Right.
They're already there. You just don't see them all the time.
Well, isn't that the ultimate sort of spiritual teaching, is that there is no separation?
Well, of course. But yeah, exactly. That is the ultimate teaching. But religion is, at least dogmatic religions, the Abrahamic religions and so on, are they're not useful because they discourage thinking. Thinking, asking questions are a threat to these institutions. You're supposed to just accept the tenets of the faith and stop asking all these inconvenient questions.
I don't call that religion.
That's not what it's about.
No.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the whole philosophy of the McKenna Academy, is that it's a cauldron where all sorts of ideas. Maybe I shouldn't invoke the word cauldron. That sounds a bit culty, but it's a place where all of these ideas and discussions and thought and everything can come together. And it's not just, I don't want it to be just a place where we're having these conversations and these discussions, and that's all very well. That's the educational component. But I would also like it to be a place where, out of these conversations and discussions, seminars, retreats, presentations, you name it, out of all this, solutions emerge and consensus emerge, where people, where the best ideas bubble to the top. And then create communities, collaborative communities, to say, yeah, this looks like the way to go. Let's move that forward.
I'm really glad you've emphasized this collaborative element. I think that is the change, that one of those key elements of the change that needs to happen on the planet, is that, combined, we create more, more power, right, more energy, more clarity. Yeah. Wonderful.
Well, capitalism and business has always been on a competitive. Their model is competitive, but I think that's an older model, and that's contributed to a lot of the problems that that we're facing now. We have to work collaboratively, and what the legal structures of those things are is secondary. It could be a corporation, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a church, even it could be various kind of a social club, whatever. Again, it's not the structure of the institution you're putting it into. It can be many things. What's important is what goes on inside that vessel. That structure.
And to stay behind the medicine idea, right? Or listen to the medicine idea, like
listen to the medicine, if that's what it's about. Yes. Right.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, there was a lot there, gentlemen. We can go on and have this conversation go all day, I'm sure. We are kind of past our time. We like to keep these things generally to an hour. But Dennis, I always thank you so much for your time and what you bring to the table. It's always a great conversation. Always gets me thinking, that's for sure. And I love the word of the day, symbiosis.
Mhm.
Symbiosis.
Yeah.
It's a good word.
It is a good word. Absolutely.
Stephen, you have any final words before we wrap this one up?
Well, just again, thank you, Dennis. I'm actually really, I don't know, amazed. Is a cheap word that gets overused, but I'm just so impressed to hear you articulate this vision for where things could go. It just strikes me as very, I don't know, just possible and visionary in that sense. And I know you don't want to build yourself up, so it's you know as well as I do, it's not about that. And
Right.
you're very humble about that. You say, yeah, that's not my idea, but nonetheless, it's just the fact that we're hearing it here, and that hopefully enough people are gonna watch this and be influenced by that. Really, I'm quite moved by that. I think it's fantastic. That it's a beautiful vision for how the world could get back on track again.
Right. And
Yeah.
likewise with you. I mean, we're the people that, for whatever reason, maybe we like to see ourselves on TV or whatever, but, we step up and talk about these things. And maybe that's a good thing. Hopefully it's opening people up to some new ideas. And, the whole sort of stance and orientation of the McKenna Academy is kind of the idea of learn to think for yourself. Learn to think first of all, and and then take advantage of the gifts that are available for learning. Not all necessarily plant medicines. There are many ways. Learn from your peers. Learn from the people you respect, and so on. I mean, really, at the base of it is, what we're trying to do is become wise. I guess that's the thing. This is the deficit that our species has. There's a deficit in wisdom. There's an abundance of cleverness. Our lack of wisdom is out of sync with our cleverness. And that can be very dangerous, because we have to have the ethical, moral, intellectual clarity to employ or deploy our cleverness in ways that are beneficial and not harmful.
I think you just nailed it. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
We can end it there, I guess. I mean, we could go on all afternoon, but that's the core of it right there.
And I just want to see all people get along, and I'm happy to share the information, share your work with whatever it is, and it's all about a oneness world for me. It's not about color, it's not about anything of that nature or culture. It's let's just all love, appreciate, and respect each other for where we're at, who we are, what our experiences are. And if the plants can teach us something, and if our peers can teach us something, and the world can teach us something, then let's be wise about it and continue to learn and grow.
Yeah.
Speaking of oneness, Mark, do you have one discount code to share with people if they've watched?
Oh, matter of fact, I do. Very well. Very good, Stephen. We have a Facebook Live discount code for anybody watching who might be interested in joining us at the conference. It's FBL 33. So it's FBL for Facebook Live 33, gives you a $33 discount. Feel free to share that around if you'd like. Anybody watching it, you're welcome to do so. We just don't advertise it or put it out there. We leave it as a gift for you to share for watching this video. So thank you for
and make your friends watch it before you tell them the code.
Yeah, you could give them a teaser too, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, we're happy to be there. And one thing I want to say about the conference, and one thing I always love about our interactions, Dennis, when we get to meet in person, is at the conference, the speakers are so available. There's no secrecy. People aren't hiding in a green room all the time and things, but everybody's accessible. So when you were talking about learning and connecting and having that conversation, is the fact that you guys all the speakers are so approachable and so willing to share and have conversations with people one-on-one or small groups at breaks and things. So I really acknowledge and appreciate that.
Well,
so thank you for being accessible.
I mean, that's part of the job, you know, and believe me, sometimes it's tempting to go hide in the green room. But, you know, that's, you know, people that come to these events deserve to be acknowledged. And part of that is being available to people that, you know, I don't know when I've ever refused to take a selfie, for instance. That seems to be the digital equivalent of a signature these days. But, you know, I enjoy talking to people. I mean, sometimes it gets to be a bit much, but you know, it's part of the job, and it's maybe one of the more rewarding parts of what I do. So, and I really appreciate the work that you guys do too.
Great. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. I think we're good for today. We're all complete. Everybody feels good?
Yeah. I feel good.
Yep. Awesome. Well, until we meet again in a month, November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, Dennis, take care of yourself. Again, welcome to Canada and back in BC. We're happy to have you, and it's great to see all the work you're doing locally since you've been here, so thank you.
Feels good to be back here, definitely. So great. I'll see you in November.
Actually, you're going to see us on October 7th
at well. Dosed, yeah.
Oh, sorry. What?
At the Dosed movie.
Oh, yes. 7th. Oh, so are you behind that too?
No, but we'll be there.
Yeah, we'll be there, and we're helping them share it. And
I will be there. Yes, I committed to it. I'll be there. Okay.
Awesome. Great. Take care, guys. Thanks again.
You too.
Bye.
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 I can just